Adapting to the new normal in the agricultural supply chain. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Tridge's first webinar of 2023. And looking at early forecasts, it looks like 2023 is yet going to be another abnormal year if we're judging it by pre-2020 standards. So, over the last 3 years, we've seen a global pandemic, we've seen some shipping delays, some food shortages. There's been a war in Europe's breadbasket, and then an unprecedented rise in input costs. And then a lot of this led to rash policy making and a lot of political tension. On top of that, climate change has also wreaked havoc in some areas. And if we think about all these events, like none of them has a very clear time in which they're going to end. So a very definite ending period. So even if these events are abnormal, they're still going to continue in 2023 as far as we can see. So in these 3 years, we've seen that the supply chain showed a lot of cracks and it's really fragile. So today we're going to discuss the supply chain, how things have changed over the last few years, and then we're going to take a look at some strategies for building a more resilient supply chain. Now, before we kick off the content part of the webinar, I'm going to give a brief introduction of Tridge. Now, Tridge is an intelligence and sourcing provider. So we deliver the most timely and valid information and analysis in the agricultural industry. Now, that comes because we have a global network of representatives that are doing the groundwork in the industry. So we can call on them, and then our intelligence includes daily analysis on prices, regulations, production, seasonality, and we put all of this content out there to help our clients to make better decisions. And that's also one of the goals of this webinar. And if you'd like more information, remember to check out our website, www.tridge.com. So with that introduction, let's move on to a few technical points. So the first one, I just want to mention, if you have any technical problems, please drop them in the chat and we'll take it from there and we'll give you some assistance. If you would like the most optimal viewing experience, if you click in the WebEx meeting on top, the part that says audio and video, and you click the side-by-side mode, that should give you a good optimal experience where you can see the presentation as well as the speakers. And then for those of you who would like captions, they're auto-generated, but they're available in English, Spanish, French, and German. So they will appear at the bottom of your screen if you choose this option. Another quick point is that we will be providing a certificate of attendance if you need that. So please, if you would like this, we ask that you fill in the survey at the end of the webinar. Now, even if you don't want or if you don't need the certificate of attendance, we would also appreciate that if you could take the survey. Like I mentioned, we do these webinars to help our clients make better decisions. And we would also like to know how we can improve and optimize these webinars. So please, everybody, take the survey. The link to the survey will be shared close to the end of the webinar during the latter parts of the panel discussion. Now, with these technical points out of the way, let's go over to the agenda. So today we're going to have a presentation. The first two parts will be a presentation. So the first one will be about the changes that has happened over the last few years and how the events that I mentioned before have changed the supply chain. And then also, what are the strategies that we can build a more robust and more resilient supply chain? And after that, we'll have a panel discussion, which will be questions to our speakers. And also, we might be able to take some live questions from the audience today. Now, I'm your host. My name is Theo. I'm a global market analyst. I work in the content creation department, which means all of the content we're putting out on the website and we're sharing with our clients goes to our department. And then we've had a little bit of bad news yesterday. So Farhat was also supposed to be a speaker today, but he's feeling a bit under the weather, so he had to pull out of this webinar. But that gives an opportunity to our other speakers to delve deeper into their specific markets. So there, Bojan. Bojan is a global market analyst. He'll be doing the presentation on the supply chain. And then we've got Dario from Argentina and also Kush from India. They will be taking some questions and having the panel discussion. So these are the people taking part in the webinar today, and I think we can just go over and start with the presentation. So Bojan, if you can give a quick introduction and then also just take it from here, please.
Thank you, Theo. For those of you who follow us regularly, you already know me, but for our new registrants, my name is Bojan Mijatovic. I'm a global market analyst at Tridge with specialty in fruits and vegetables, and also grains. So I'm an agriculture engineer. My background is over 15 years of experience in the agribusiness. So for today's presentation, first part will be major changes in the agricultural supply chain. We can move on to the first line, Theo. So over the past few years, the global agricultural supply chain has been exposed to extremely vulnerable disruptions. Why are supply chains becoming more vulnerable? Heightened demand, trade restrictions, port closures, rising freight rates, and reliance on just-in-time inventory systems have led to global shortages and inflation. The disruptions to supply chains has become more widespread, growing from an agriculture producer to threat to economic stability. I emphasize on the following some of the main factors that may create agriculture supply chain disruptions. On the number one position is the COVID-19. Second, climate change and environmental factors. Also, changing geopolitical landscape on the focus on Russia, Ukraine. Logistics, port closures, and various bottlenecks. Rising costs in the whole supply chains, with emphasis on the financial risks. Labor shortages that were problem even before and now even more than ever. And finally, energy costs. We can move on to the next slide. So COVID-19 made irreversible changes to the supply chains. COVID-19 had a critical impact on global trade and is still shaping the global agriculture markets. Just as consumers are feeling the supply chain headaches, so too are the farmers, food processors, and shelf stockers. Nearly everything from fertilizers for fields, feed ingredients for livestock, to harvesting fresh produce has been impacted to disruptions on the supply chains. Maybe some of us forgot about COVID-19, but recent China's strict COVID policies led to supply chain bottlenecks with zero COVID as more of the select drivers of global recessions. Trade in Shanghai and Beijing slowed or stopped completely. These disruptions caused various prices to go up in China. For example, China's vegetable prices have risen in November due to epidemic control measures implemented across the country. These regulations have made it difficult for trucks to enter and exit regional tomato farms and marketplaces. For pork prices, also on our platform present various data analysis and Tridge analysis, pork prices in China dropped to the lowest level on renewed COVID lockdowns. However, this weekly decline in prices in late November was the sharpest since June, and it was likely a result from this renewed COVID lockdowns in several parts of the country. What is also damaged is the agriculture production due to the limited labor and raw materials. Disruptions in the supply chains lead to price increases. We have another example with the coffee prices. Although the composite global coffee prices steadily declined month over month, the prices are still significantly higher than the pre-COVID levels, and are predicted to remain above pre-COVID levels for over a year. Problems with labor mobility. COVID has caused labor mobility to be difficult to travel to different countries and to different regions of the same country. So this has also led to reduction in efficiency. The global economic slowdown and the lockdowns associated with China's zero COVID policy have played a big part in volatility of its trade. With no clear signs of rapid improvements in the current situation, export orders are expected to drop in the following next few months. We can move on to the next slide. Increased effects of climate and environmental factors. Adverse weather is now more than ever affecting the agricultural supply chain. Climate change leads to more frequent extreme weather events, plant and animal diseases outbreaks. Extremely wet weather influenced the potato shortages in New Zealand. Also, environmental factors such as occurrences of some pests, for example, Mediterranean fruit fly detections in the US, prohibited import of fresh bell peppers from Spain. Citrus greening, another disease that is spreading in the orange production in the US, had affected or will have effect potentially on global orange supplies. Despite the increase in Brazil's orange production, citrus greening continues to spread across Brazilian and Floridian farms, and significant production losses are expected in the next 3 years, leading to potential global shortages of oranges. In China, production of ginger was influenced by adverse weather, which impeded production. Heavy rains during the summer and October negatively affected the yield, with farmers expecting up to 50% reduction in their rice crop. These are just some of the few examples that are present on our platform. What is the consequences of all these changes? Increased effects of climate and environmental factors leads to reduced agricultural productivity. Also, research and development departments are spending more and more resources and money to implement these new techniques and new varieties in hope to cope with climate changes. Higher costs are needed for suppressing negative factors. Move on to the next slide. How is changing geopolitical landscape and Russia-Ukraine affecting the global events? This is very unpredictable. The effect of for example, the effect of the Indian export regulation on wheat and sugar. In this example, we can see how everything is connected. The global wheat supply was disrupted due to Russia-Ukraine conflict. India experienced high global demand, coupled with wheat production disrupted by heat waves. Brazil, on the other side, a major exporter of sugar, experienced production issues due to persistent droughts. As a result, consumers looked for alternative markets like India to make up for the supply shortages. The Indian sugar harvest then coincided with weather anomalies, which disrupted Indian sugar production. Due to these events, Indian government banned export of wheat and sugar, and this put pressure on international market. The same example goes for the Russian Federation, which extended the ban on the export of rice for the first half of 2023. Another example is the social unrest in Brasilia, which could lead to a rise to soy prices. In Peru, in the previous year, effectively, it opened market for Brazil's pork. This is also the examples how the trade regulations are affecting global trade. EU had various options to source raw cocoa as demand for ethical and sustainable cocoa rises. US also had problems with strikes, trucker strikes, and impaired logistics, which affected Canada also. The consequences of geopolitical influence on supply chains are adverse. Penalties or fines due to violation of regulation within the supply chain. Also, failure to anticipate future government actions, such as import bans and export restrictions, are always affecting traders. Compliance cost due to violations of environmental guidelines is always burdened, is increasing traders' costs. You can move on to the next slide, Theo. Logistics, port closure and bottlenecks also represent a major problem in the agricultural supply chain. The Russia-Ukraine war continues to be a crucial factor in the agricultural supply chain and the Black Sea grain flows. The ocean freight contract market experienced a price drop of 5.6% in November, and for the third consecutive month, rates have lowered, marking the most significant decline since 2019. Again, orders from Chinese manufacturers will be as much as 40% lower than their current standings. So these changes in demand and the cost of freight is affecting traders. In USA, high demand for trucks in the week 52 increased prices due to increased demand for trucks for the upcoming holiday season, the goods to be delivered. Prices of transportation jumped for $1,000 from in compared to the week 51. Customers were waiting until the holidays to start loading due to high demand for trucks. It is expected that demand for will normalize in the second quarter of 2023 at the earliest. Still, higher transportation costs leads to are caused with imports taking longer routes and alternative routes. Also, there are some positive remarks. For example, in the Philippines, shipment of pineapple from Philippines will possibly have a reefer ship instead of a containers in 2023. In the Philippines, there's a new player negotiating in the shipping industry with major corporate exporters for Japanese and Korean market, which will be a great addition to the fresh produce supply chain needs, especially for pineapples in Philippines. We can move on to the next slide, Theo. So rising costs in the full supply chain and their financial risks, on top of the trade disruptions and increased commodity prices caused by the post-COVID recovery, along with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and other global factors that led to even higher prices of inputs and energy. As a result, food inflation around the globe and the trade was further disrupted. What are the consequences? Credit ratings of agriculture suppliers may decline with failure to implement risk mitigation processes, resulting in higher financial costs. Price increases or price volatility of agricultural inputs and commodities. One example that I chose to point out was the price of Turkey's pomegranate, which skyrocketed more than 200% month on month due to increased input costs and lower supply. In Italy, we have another example from our platform, how the oranges prices soared 25% month of month due to high input costs and labor costs. Loss of contracts due to environmental and human rights impacts are also present. The final result is decreased sales due to shifting consumer tastes. We move on to the next slide, Theo. Energy costs and labor shortages. Even before COVID, labor shortages were a problem in agriculture. In an analysis from our very own Prince Johnson, we can see current dairy situation in New Zealand and Australia farms, which are reportedly in short supply of farm hands, which may also dampen gains made early on in the current season. With the decline in prices of the just ended auction on the backdrop of rising production costs and general inflationary pressures facing farmers, there is a concern within the dairy industry about how farmers are going to react to this news in terms of production. It is fair to assert that farmers would be unhappy with the direction of trade. Also, in another analysis, input prices were analyzed by René Salinas and our global marketing team in the monthly report in November regarding global trade and price movement. There we emphasized the high energy prices that will potentially affect EU fruit and vegetable production. Input prices such as oil and fertilizers seem to have reversed their downward trend in October and November, putting more pressure on agri-commodities. Higher feed, fertilizer, and energy prices and a weaker US dollar might indicate a possible inflection point for global agri-commodity prices. We are now moving to the second part of our presentation. What are the strategies to optimize the supply chain?
We are now moving on to the second part of our presentation. What are the strategies to optimize the supply chain? For suppliers, one of the ways is by boosting resilience. How can we boost resilience? By going digital and using digital technologies. They allow us to have flexibility and agility right across the supply chain. Joined up team working for across the global teams separated geographically but close together by digital tools. Focusing on creating more intelligent supply chains is also one of the benefits of digital tools. Adapt quickly and effectively on changing demands. They also provide us potential to identify potential bottlenecks and inefficiencies before they have a detrimental impact. Net trade, diversification of imports and exports are also needed in this modern global trade. Digital agriculture is a seamless integration of digital technologies into crop and livestock management and other processes in agriculture. For farmers, digital agriculture offers the opportunity to increase production, save cost in the long term, and eliminate risk.
Suppliers need to be efficient. Efficiency is the key. Efficient supply chains optimize profitability. Risk hedging. There are some three examples. First, risk hedging is with low demands and high supply. Uncertainty should follow the risk hedging strategy to reduce costs. Another example is responsive supply chains. Responsive and quickly adaptable and flexible to meet the changing needs of customers. And agile supply chains. This is a combination between risk hedging and responsive supply chains. The extra margin obtains profitability in this supply chain because of the responsiveness and the capacity to minimize supply loss. In general, the profitability of the supply chain would be improved drastically via better delivery performance, improved responsiveness of fewer stockouts and higher product quality, more receiver-friendly loads. Also, increased information availability is needed, better demand insight, more predictable order cycles, accurate and in real time. Also, the reduction of inventory recurring, reduced overstocks are needed for the faster inventory turns. We can move on to the next slide, please, Theo. We need to redesign the supply chain strategies. This is a slow and very painful process, but it's much needed. There is a need to eliminate the time delays in goods and information flows from the supply chain. This can be achieved by better planning and better use of information technologies and improved logistics. Exchange information concerning actual market demand with parties upstream in the supply chain. Again, IT and collaboration among chain partners are vital issues. Remove one or more intermediate echelons in the supply chain by business takeover. The so-called vertical integration, where activities in one stage production are absorbed by another, for example, purchasing, processing. Improve the decision rules. With digital technologies, we can improve the decision rules at each stage of the supply chain, modify the order quantity, procedures, or their parameters using information from the supply chain. Chain partners must develop contracts and establish parameters, standards, or procedures to facilitate and streamline their transactions. Move on to the next slide. This is much needed. Innovation in agriculture techniques. Innovation in every stage of agricultural production, from seed to harvest. We must use climate resilient technology. Due to ever-changing climate, sustainability may be the key to cope with changing weather, extreme events, and natural disasters. Some of the methods I have mentioned here, but there are many more, like the early sowing and zero tillage in wheat, improved varieties of rice and wheat, direct seeded rice and weed and pest management. Also for the fruit and vegetable, integrated pest management can be used along and added with the organic method of farming. Better agronomic practices act as a catalyst. They boost stronger and sustainable agricultural food systems. One of the examples I have pointed out here is the modern technologies. Agricultural machinery, computer system, electronics, chemical sensors, and data management all work as a one whole in the goal to improve equipment operation and decision-making of farmer, and ultimately reduce human input and error. Move on to the next slide. Digitalization. We have mentioned it before. Now we are focusing on our platform, trading platforms. Tridge has the largest audience size, the highest engagement rate, and the highest retention rate compared to other business-to-business platforms in the agribusiness space. Tridge wants to address the issue via an online platform that matches global food agriculture buyers and sellers. At any time, visiting our platform can give you the information you need, connect you with buyers and suppliers all over the world. Platform helps also researchers and buyers and suppliers by ordering, enabling to source their food and agricultural items at reasonable prices with more than 150 countries. Tridge owns data covering approximately 15,000 agricultural products with 50,000 price updates. This is enormous use of data and very valuable data present on our platform. Move on to the next slide. Government support. No matter how big or small agriculture company is, you always need governmental support. USDA announced a new system aimed at transformation of food systems. This will benefit consumers, producers, and rural communities. It will help them to look for more options for trade, increase access to existing and new markets, and better markets for small and mid-sized producers. Almost in every government in the world, small and medium-sized producers are at the focus of any agricultural policy. Better strengthens critical supply chain and address long-standing structural challenges that were revealed and intensified by the pandemic. During COVID-19, USDA made significant investments through its pandemic assistance program. After COVID-19 and with the Russia-Ukraine war, it was clear that things cannot go back to the same old. US system is building a more resilient food supply chain that provides more and better market options for consumers and producers while reducing carbon footprints. Ecology and ecological agro-system is more and more in focus in almost every country in the world. Creating a fairer food system combats market dominance and helps producers and consumers to gain more power in the marketplace. Also, there is a goal in making nutritious food more accessible and affordable for consumers. Governments can help in the following areas: unblock and de-risk, for example, Black Sea logistic routes, reduce trade restrictions, and release buffer stocks to rebalance global food supply. Individual countries need to increase the supply of grain traded on the world market and provide financial aid to the most impacted areas and populations. Okay, move on to the next. Prospect for the agricultural supply chains. Despite recent decrease in price of freight, energy, and other inputs, levels are still high compared to 2021. Commodity prices will continue to be high compared to the pre-COVID-19 period. This new normal is here to stay in 2023. Supply chains are more complex, and even a single issue that goes wrong can impact the rest of the process. What happened in the past few years, like they say, it's a perfect storm. Supply shocks and demand shocks happened simultaneously. Capacity limitations exist from the beginning of the supply chain to the end. Labor shortages were a problem even before the COVID-19. Raw materials and its uncertainty regarding availability also emphasized the problems in the agricultural supply chain. Inflexibility of plants that process some of the food consumers buy. This is an example for the meat company and the meat during the COVID. The consumer habits changed, and the factories that couldn't process meat in the way that the market demanded went out of business. Natural disasters will change what we produce, will have an impact on our production capacity in the long term, and will change the locations of our supplies. These are the words of Eric Sunmes, associate professor at Nebraska University. And these are also totally true. 2023 is expected to be a recovery year with cautious outlook. Businesses should prepare to capitalize any opportunities that may appear. Now more than ever, access to the real-time market intelligence data and information is crucial weapon to fight transportation and supply costs. I also point out some of the few key remarks for 2023. South American weather patterns with La Nina, which can impact the production of key crops like soybeans and corn. Chinese demand, which has a significant influence of all global commodity markets. Black Sea grain flows was problem before, it will continue to be in our headlines even in the 2023. Central bank policies of every government, which can affect global risk sentiment and currency values for all commodity prices. Examining the conditions that were present leading up to the 2007 and 2008 global food crisis and the 2010-2011 food price hike that contributed to the Arab Spring, we observed that higher risk to the global food system exists today. This was my part of the presentation. I thank you all for your patience and for your attention. If you have any questions, please address it to the live chat section. Moving on to you, Theo.
Thank you, Bojan. Yeah, I think very informative, especially the part about the research and innovation in the agricultural industry is interesting for me. And I'd like to ask you a quick question. So, for example, in the market that I follow in nuts, you know, if you plant nut trees, it takes about 7 years for them to mature and start bearing crop. Now you follow the fruit and vegetable market. Now for some crops like soybeans and corn, you can kind of, if there's genetic improvement, you can kind of already start planting them the next year. What's the situation like, for example, fruit trees? How long do they take before they start bearing, and what's like the lifespan of these fruit trees?
You cannot fight the nature. Of course, technology is advancing, and for the fruits, for example, apple production, it's for example in Italy, the lifespan when the fruit tree is coming to how do you say, the full production has shortened. For example, at 4 years, maybe even in 3 years, they are producing apple trees that can even bear fruit in the first year. So these modern technologies, yes, they can improve agricultural production and everything, but natural lifespan of fruits, for example, cannot be shortened that much. And for the fruits, of course, massive research, massive knowledge, and extensive gathering of data before going into any production. So you have to take account climatic factors, soil factors, and of course, market factor. Do you have a product that is needed, and does it have a good price? Of course, add costs, add profit, and then you go into the production and planning.
Yeah, I think especially true for these longer, which are not seasonal crops. Very important to plan ahead. Yeah, thank you for that, Bojan.
For the nuts, it goes by twice harder for the nuts.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I also want to remind everybody that we might have some time at the end of the webinar to answer some live questions. So if you have questions specifically for Bojan, please write them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them. Also, we're going to speak to the panelists. If you have any specific questions for them, also please write them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them by the end of this webinar. If not, please still write these questions, and in the follow-up email we'll be sending out, we will address all of the questions that we get. So we're moving on to the panel discussion. We've got some questions for our panelists. Now I'm just quickly going to ask them to introduce themselves before we start the questions. So let's start with Dario. Dario, can you just give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Dario Parlascino. I belong to Tridge Argentina team, and my position is Global Origination Manager here. My job is to generate business to Tridge as well as provide intelligence of the food market in my country. Almost my entire professional career has been related to agribusiness in different companies and from different points of view. And I am here to share with you my vision regarding supply chains and what could happen in the coming month. Thank you all for joining this very interesting webinar.
Thank you, Dario. And over to you, Kush.
Hi, namaste everybody. My name is Kaushik. I'm representing Tridge India. I'm being a logistician. I take care of the global logistics and the operations in India. And I've been having a decade years of experience in the supply chain where I've been working with shipping line companies. I've been previously worked up with the customs house agents, and now presently taking and going forward with Tridge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys, for the introduction. So we're gonna go straight to these questions. For the first one, it asks, so if we're taking a look at the flow of agricultural commodities, what are the forecasts? What are the expectations and the trends for 2023? So I'm gonna ask Dario if you can take this question first, and then just pass it directly over to Kush, please.
Yes, of course. On one hand, I want to mention some fundamental points of the global geopolitical situation, which can influence the trends, and I think we should pay special attention to it. And then mention the possible trends for the coming months, years. As we know, inflation worldwide can have negative consequences. For example, in the United States, the only alternative for the Federal Reserve is to stifle inflation with high interest rates. Despite the interventions that the Federal Reserve can probably make to contain the consequence of high interest rates, this will spread throughout the economy, affecting supply chains, services, companies, and the purchasing power of the citizens, of course. Then I want to mention some political conflicts that are taking place in Latin America, for example, in Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, and for example, in my country, the drought that we have been suffering for months caused a very poor wheat harvest last year. And now we are facing that a large part of the corn harvest is being lost. This situation can be translated in higher price worldwide, as Bojan mentioned before. Another point is that the European Union is reducing imports of Russian energy, fueling inflation in Europe, makes some industries less competitive. Russia and Ukraine, of course, are also important in the supply of grains, oils, and other products to world markets. Higher food prices mean more famine in this case. Another point is that analysts are scanning the horizon for the next big geopolitical storm, to say in a way, and many have focused on Taiwan, which produces 90% of the world's most advanced chips or semiconductors, to say. They say that, for example, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could shut down TSMC, the largest semiconductor producer, with devastating result of the world economy. Another situation that we must closely monitor is the evolution of number of COVID cases in China. As we have seen in recent times, the closure of ports and factories in the Asian country can mean serious problem of the global supply chain. So these points are very important to analyze. And then I want to mention some trends that have been observed in recent years and are likely to continue or gain momentum in the coming months, years included. First of all, the increased use of technology to improve traceability, transparency, and efficiency in supply chain management. Industry 4.0, has been established in the supply chains of companies in recent years, adapting to the needs and demands of the sector to generate greater opportunity. Many of these changes will continue, and great advances will be necessary when seeking to obtain a competitive advantage in the sector. One of the main trends is the focus on sustainability and environmental impact, with an emphasis on reducing, for example, food waste or the use of eco-friendly packaging and transportation methods. Today, more than ever, one of the great challenges for the logistics sector is the implementation of policies that seek to reduce the carbon footprint by reducing, of course, the amount of gas emissions. As an example, to achieve this objective is the renewal of the vehicle fleet with units adapted to the global sustainability guidelines. Another point is the use of automation and robotics to optimize logistics operations, such as warehouse management and last-time delivery. Another thing is the use of drones, of course, and then the use of digital platforms and digital twinning to optimize logistics and reduce environmental impact. That's all, Theo.
Thank you, Dario. Yeah, it seems it goes beyond just the agricultural industry. So let's go over to Kush. Kush, what do you think? What are the trends for supply chain?
Yeah, so the trend is actually pointing towards the upwards because post COVID, things are getting the new normal, what the people are saying now. So in terms of the agriculture commodities, it's getting upwards since the beginning of this year, 2023. And it is getting more strength mainly because of the demand recovery, which was the after brief correction, which happened in the pre-COVID stage. So in terms of that, even the recent war which is happening, and also there are many other factors, these trends are basically changing in terms of the supply chain visibility problems. People like big consumers are keeping up with expectations, but the level of visibility available when the sophistication and simplicity is lacking with the customers. There are various blind spots in this journey where businesses are unable to keep a track. So logistics 4.0 is something which has been going to be the next trend and future in this industry, like digitization or automation of businesses and logistics process through networking of devices. There is a big data which is coming into the picture, where you have you can collect and share big data to optimize your businesses and logistics process. Similar fashion, if you go, you can check towards the globalization. So people are getting closer, the international network is actually building very close. So the trends is improving. So although through digitization and more localization for stable supply chain, so the trend will be more stable in the coming years also. And use of robots and the artificial intelligence, like support for simple fulfillment activities, the digital can be used as helpers. And even in logistics, if you see, there is a lot of innovation which is coming into the picture, like in the multimodal transportation, you have multiple various channels on the first mile and on the last mile delivery as well. So more stable supply chain through more flexible use of different modes of transport actually will gain better uh, progress. And coming to the last is sustainability, like advanced and innovative technologies for reduction of greenhouse and gas emissions. So these trends also will be major increase in this. So that's the
Thank you, Kush. Yeah, it seems both you and Dario mentioned the role that technology will play in the future. So
yes.
Thank you for that. We're gonna move straight on to the next question. So, what are some of the preventative measures for buyers and suppliers so they can keep the supply chain stable? So, planning ahead. Let's start with you this time, Kush, and then we'll go over to Dario.
Okay. So in terms of the preventive measures, definitely it's always, to be cautious, especially when we are having this data, like significant measures or actions can be taken or not taken once, because one of the chain in the supply chain, if you see, determines the cost incurred. In the other link is that if there is a proper coordination, basically a supply chain is a family of a well knit coordinated information flow which happens, which involves structured relationship between the major key players like the farmers, the service providers, the traders, the buyers. So breaking all these barriers by reducing the number of middlemen right from the point of procurement to supply. So basically, you can bring in private players. Like for example, in India, uh, the government of India have set up the APMR Act, and they've amended to set up private markets and contract farming in direct marketing. So in this way, the basic preventive measures can be taken, and also introduction to the algorithm based data collection, like to foresee and proceed the risk management.
Good. Over to you, Dario. Dario, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry. First of all, I want to mention 5 trends that are making the way to promote resilience. The first one is related to an analysis of the most critical areas of each supply chain. Each company is different. With this, we can control possible dependency situations, and contingency plans can be drawn to analyze possible adverse scenarios. Secondly, the importance of the new technologies that can give us visibility of our operations. We need a digitalization, of supply chains. For example, collecting data, transforming into relevant information, and provide or create predictive capabilities in the event of possible disruptions in the supply chain. On the other hand, of course, is very important. Another important point is the risk management. We must identify the risk, monitoring it, and designing alternatives is essential to achieve resilient supply chains. In fourth position, we must prepare to our workers so that they act in the best way in the face of any contingency is another key element so that the supply chain can respond quickly to adverse scenarios. Finally, if it is within the company's possibilities, we can analyze to invest in the rest of the collaborators in the chain in order to prevent the weakest links from posing risk to the entire system. We must identify critical points and as one of the priorities to achieve resilient supply chains. And then to mention some preventive measures that buyers and suppliers can take in order to keep the supply chain stable. I can mention, for example, it's logical, but diversify suppliers and sources, we must have, if possible, multiple suppliers for the same product to reduce the dependence of a single source and mitigate the risk of disruptions. We must develop long-term partnerships by developing long-term relationships with suppliers. Buyers and suppliers can establish trust, improve communication, and create a sense of collaboration, of course. This can help to identify potential risk and develop the contingency plans in some case of disruptions of the supply chain. We must conduct regular supplier evaluations by regularly suppliers based on factors such as quality, delivery performance, and risk management. Well, okay, related to this, we must implement a risk management strategy, and then we must use digital tools to improve visibility and traceability, as I mentioned before. Digital tools, we can mention blockchain, RFID, EDI. We can improve visibility and traceability in the supply chain. And then we can help to identify with this and respond to potential disruptions.
Thank you very much, Dario. We're going to move on directly to the next question, which is about digitalization. This is something we've already touched on a little bit, but let's go deeper into this topic. So can it simplify transactions, documentation, and communication? And also, how will it get implemented into the supply chain? So let's mix it up again. So we'll start with you, Dario.
Okay, Theo, thank you. Yes, of course. For example, by the digitalization can simplify transactions, documentation and communication, of course, in the modern global value chain or supply chain. Digital tools can also facilitate communication and collaboration between partners, suppliers, and customers, regardless of their location. This can lead to increased transparency and traceability, and this can help to mitigate risk and improve overall performance. Additionally, the use of digital technologies can facilitate real-time monitoring and analytics. That is a very important point. Which can help companies to take more informed decisions and respond more quickly to change in the market or in a bad situation of the supply chain or a particular situation with a client or supplier. I only want to mention some tools that are the most used or are the trendy tools that are electronic data interchange, EDI system that are being used, for example, by manufacturers and retailers to exchange purchase order, invoices, and other documents electronically. Then, of course, the blockchain technology that we can talk hours about this. IoT, Internet of Things, for example, devices and sensors are being used in the food industry to monitor and track the temperature and condition of food products during transportation, for example. Then we have cloud-based platforms that are being used to enable communication, collaboration, and data sharing. As an example of this, as Bojan mentioned before, Tridge Exhibition 365 platform that we are launching in February and will directly connect thousands of validated suppliers and buyers all the year, 24/7. And this is very positive for all the actors, very, very positive. then we can give you some presentation of this new platform of Tridge. And then to close my answer, data analytics. Of course, this is the future to decision making. For example, machine learning and the artificial intelligences are being used to optimize production, processes, and logistics. We can improve forecasting, for example, and optimize inventory management. Overall, these are examples on how digitalization can help the global industry to improve efficiency, reduce cost, and we have more product safety and traceability.
Thank you very much, Dario. And Kush, over to you.
Yeah, so digitization, of simplifying transactions and documentations, yes. Basically, when you digitize your supply chain, it creates a lot of opportunities and connecting, different peoples who is involved in the supply chain and the systems, and also enabling, communications across for the entire organization. So basically, when you talk about earlier, things were a little bit, brick and mortar. Technology was not that much placed into the logistics sectors because a lot of bits and pieces or information have been scattered around. But when you centralize the information, it becomes a boon to the customer. So the real-time data and discovery is something, which is a real need of the hour presently. And you can have a track and trace options where through the IoT devices, you'll be able to track it on the real time. And the API integrations with the shipping line companies will ensure that there is transparency in the complete flow of information, because every bits and pieces of information is very much valuable for the supply chain. Like with time, analytics and data comprehension will rule the market. Like learning to make full use of tech available, is on data. So that is like focus on AI enabled resources. And if you're talking about more in terms of the transactions, even the UPI have been introduced, like seamless transactions only with minimal details is now a reality. So documentations, if you're talking in specific, paperless clearance like EDI exchange of the information, which goes very hand in hand, and introduction of cloud storage, where like an online platform for your documentations has become something useful, where you don't need to worry about the space issues. And various communication tools like chat box, increase of seamless, consumer calls and chats is also been a very good impact. So even if you see the overall, the real-time tracking can be shared via these platforms, to enhance the communications between the buyer and the supplier. So moreover, significant measures are taken, with this, which will give further more integrated systems. Like people are now investing more into the integrated supply chain systems, infrastructures. Like multimodals are popping up where farmers or growers are required to follow certain specifications. So with that, digital advancements are offering, a way of to optimize agriculture supply. Artificial intelligence driven algorithms, explore all possible planning and scheduling. So all this will happen only when you digitize your businesses. So with the help of digital technologies such as, weather, soil, logistics, price fluctuations, all this are drift on board. So the global logistics supply chain is soon going to be an immense growth of opportunity, when people are trying to digitize their businesses. Thank you.
Fantastic, guys. I'm gonna try and squeeze in one question from the audience that they asked. So we might go like 1 or 2 minutes over time. We've had a lot about developing countries and how they can digitalize. Now, I think a lot of us are talking about the new technology and how it's being implemented in some of the developed countries. But what is the need? So I'm going to ask this question. I'll ask it to all three of our speakers, but I'm going to put like a time limit if you can keep your answer to less than 1 minute, maybe. So what would be the strategies in developing countries, just from your point of view, to implement these, let's say, digitalization in their supply chain? And also, what are the challenges? Like, there was another question about South Africa's power cuts. If you don't have the infrastructure, obviously, that's a big challenge. So just quickly, how can developing countries digitalize, and what are the challenges that they face? Bojan, can we start with you?
Thank you, Theo. Developing countries have a huge opportunity and massive potential to improve its digital technologies and infrastructure. For example, if in the past they didn't invest so much in infrastructure, technology has changed during the time. They can now jump to the most actual modern technologies, digital technologies, and implement infrastructure, most modern infrastructure. But this will, of course, depend on the financial resources every developing country has.
Thank you. Yeah, there needs to be some investment. Let's go over to you, Kush.
Yeah, so in terms of firstly, we have to educate them. We have to ensure that they are well educated, like what will be the end result of this. See, anything is not an overnight result. So when you start investing, and when you start teaching about this in the developing countries, about technology, how it can help, probably it might help them to take some time to get with the technology. But with this, what will happen is it will centralize all the information. So with the flow of information to each and every party on this, will actually make a very good use of it. So it is always better first to understand how we can, like what Bojan was also saying in terms of the infrastructure. So the infrastructure has to be developed in terms of the government has to come with financial supports and help, so that the technology can be driven in the country as well.
Thank you very much. And Dario.
Hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I think it is something that it depends mostly on the government. It has to be a state policy, not just a project. They must guarantee the budgets to carry it out. They must identify possible alliances with global companies that can help. And of course, they must explain very, very well the benefits of these policies to the whole society.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I speak to a lot of farmers close to where I am, and you know, it's amazing how few of them have any records at all of what they're doing. And even though the infrastructure is there, like Kush also said, the education, they need to understand why it's important to keep these records, and how it will help the whole supply chain. So thank you very much, guys, for your answers. That brings us to the end of our webinar. So thanks again for everybody that joined us. If you would like to get your banner on Tridge's ad services, please make contact with our sales team. And just for any information you might need, contact us, or also visit our website. Like I mentioned before, it's www.tridge.com. Yeah, thanks again to our panelists for your insightful answers, and Bojan for your presentation. And good luck, everybody, for 2023. We hope things get back to normal, or at least stay at the new normal.